The relationship with the club is one of belonging. And here I don't fall for that nonsense of saying they're more patriotic or anything like that. What myths have we built in our history? When the World Cup starts, all that goes out the window. Lúcio talking, the World Cup breathing down our necks, my people, let's go.
Lúcio, is the relationship Brazilian fans have with the national team the same as the one they have with their clubs? And if you don't think so, why not?
No, it's not the same. Yeah, it's interesting for us to think about it that way. The relationship with the club is built on family affection, passed down from generation to generation. I mean, if each person here thinks about how they became a fan of that team, they'll have their best memories. And necessarily, this relationship comes from the affection between father and son, mother and daughter. It's that formative image. You going up the Maracanã ramp with your father, with your mother, holding hands, that's it. When you think like that, why did I become a Flamengo fan? Why did I become a Fluminense fan? Your first memory is family related. The relationship with the national team is more about national identity. Now, you build this relationship with your own national identity. I mean, deep down, what's at stake here is the big thing that makes us a fan of something, of some institution, of some club, belonging. That's the key word. The relationship with the club is a relationship of belonging. And the relationship with the national team is different because of that. And here I'm not saying it's better, worse, etc., but it's not that relationship of belonging that you have with the club. With your favorite club, it's a temporary relationship. It only really takes shape every 4 years. And it's for another reason of identity, etc. It's not the same thing. Ancestral, of blood, of family, etc. From the ties of your history, of your family.
Because right next door, Lúcio, our neighbor, the relationship Argentinians have with their national team seems to be more intense than that of Brazilians. And they also have this sense of belonging with their club.
Yes. Yeah, but they managed to build a stronger relationship with their national team, right? With the national team. And here, I don't fall for that nonsense of saying they're more patriotic, etc. Or not. Yeah, it always ends up turning into some silly talk that Brazilians are cowards, that they're this or that. It's nothing like that. Everyone is patriotic in their own way, etc. It's just that they managed to build this national identity. This identity, this sense of belonging with the national team, I think it's for a few reasons, but I see that they were really stirred up by some things, right? Like, for example, the Falklands War. So that really came to the surface, right? You were in that context, and then you have that unbelievable situation. The story is that the Falklands War breaks out in '82, right in the middle of a World Cup in Spain. In '86, the big game of the World Cup, maybe the greatest game in World Cup history, is Argentina versus England, where Maradona does what he does. So all of that helped bring this story even more to the surface. And that's not all. These differences in the way Brazilians and Argentinians see things aren't just about soccer or about their relationship with their national team, which is stronger for them than it is for us. Argentinians can do some things we can't due to historical reasons, like how they create their myths. Brazilians have a lot of difficulty building their own myths, right? If you think about it, what myths have we created in our history? It's hard to come up with any. You start thinking, there's that, and then we start discussing. If you sit down tomorrow to have dinner at a table with Argentinians, you'll get into an endless debate about who is the great founding myth of Argentina, around whom they built this mythological imagination. And then the argument will start, because one will say it's Evita, another will say it's Perón, another will say it's Maradona, and another will say it's Gardel. And they'll argue about it all night and won't reach a conclusion. Meanwhile, in Brazil, we'll just be like, so we have a harder time building these myths in our imagination. And I think that has a lot to do with the sense of belonging they have with their national team, and we don't.
So does that have to do with Maradonism?
It has a lot to do with it. I think there are earlier issues, etc., etc. It doesn't start with Maradona, but Maradona, his image, his figure, that passionate side of him, really comes out a lot. Maradona was the expression of all of that.
And why didn't Brazilians build that connection with Pelé, or did they?
Yeah, great question, man. Yeah, I think like, damn, you're gonna make me think, but honestly, I won't have a definitive answer, okay? Yeah, I kind of regret that maybe deep down there's so much racism in all of this, you know, that it wasn't built even though he's the king, even though, etc. Our society is already a racist society, right? Historically racist. And I think maybe they never really elevated Pelé to that status, etc. As much of a recognized idol as he is, he doesn't. In the Brazilian imagination, he doesn't occupy the same place of construction as Maradona. Maybe much of it comes from our historical racism. I'm not making a definitive statement. It's something I hadn't considered and need to think about, but it does cross my mind.
Speaking of today, does the fact that the main idols play abroad reduce the fans' identification with the national team, Luis?
No, I think we're going through something funny, right, Joni? Like, because these are two different moments. At first, this thing of players leaving, it started back in the 80s, right? Before, it was very sporadic, right? You had Evaristo de Macedo, who went to Barcelona. Real Madrid in the 50s, another one here and there. In the 80s, we really started to have a diaspora, right? Players started leaving Italian championship. But it was very different, hard for you to follow. People today have no idea what it was like. You had one championship broadcast, which was the Italian championship on band, right? On Sundays at 11 in the morning. And it wasn't really something families got attached to. You could watch an Italian championship game, but it wasn't a big deal. Today you can watch it anywhere, right? You just grab your phone and watch. So at first I think that at first when this diaspora of players starts, when they start leaving, it establishes, they become much more distant from the fans, right? Because they really can't see them. Today, I think it's on another level, almost like superstars. As a business, it's starting to come back. You're starting to get closer again. You can get a little closer to these guys again. So to sum it up, at first when these players go abroad, they distance themselves a lot, but today, not so much anymore. A kid can still have a hero, a guy who plays for Manchester, Liverpool, Real Madrid, and so on.
Lúcio, what was the relationship like between the fans and the national team before this big exodus of players you mentioned to Europe?
My time as a fan was already during this exodus, you know? But I tend to think it was closer, you know? That the fan had a closer relationship, and for several reasons that we can discuss here, that has grown a bit distant. Among them, the constant mismanagement by the CBF, our football power brokers, all of that gradually pushed things apart. And because of this relationship, the fan's sense of belonging to their club is much stronger, despite the awful, corrupt club officials and all that. He ends up staying there even with all the dirty tricks. With the CBF, it's not such a visceral relationship, so he ends up distancing himself, you know.
Lúcio, every World Cup year is an election year in Brazil. That's why I ask you, does the country's political environment influence support for the Brazilian national team?
That's a curious thing, right? Because it does influence up to a certain point. When the World Cup is about to start, when things get serious, that ends. We can try to explain, get into why I think that, right? But why does it influence? Because lately we've seen an appropriation of the symbols of the Brazilian national team, right? For example, in Brazil's case, the far right adopted the national team's jersey as a symbol. If you're a guy from the left, you distance yourself so you're not mistaken. We're seeing something funny happen right now, aren't we? Some people are putting banners in their windows like this. It's for the World Cup, not for politics. I don't know what, explaining, right? So I think these things, this appropriation of symbols, pushed another group away. And there's another curious thing, right? People, I don't know if they're following, but in Colombia right now, we're in an election period, right? On the eve of an election. And exactly the same thing is happening. The far right and the right have appropriated the uniform. So whoever is out on the street wearing a Colombia shirt is necessarily someone supporting the right-wing candidates. And those on the left end up distancing themselves from the national team and its symbols. But when the World Cup starts, that all goes out the window. Exactly, and that's the magic of soccer, and we have some amazing testimonies about that, you know? For example, at the height of the repression, at the height of the dictatorship, it was very common for political prisoners to debate whether they would, or even those who weren't imprisoned. But those on the left who couldn't support the national team, who couldn't cheer, because they would be supporting the dictatorship, the repression. So there are amazing testimonies from people who are in the dungeon, being tortured, and they say, I'm not going to cheer at all because that would support the regime. But when the game starts, my friend, that's it, all of that ends. The guy just couldn't help it. I highly recommend this book called Gracias a Vida by Sid Benjamin, a historical figure and also a journalist, where he tells exactly this story. It's his report about being imprisoned, tortured, and so on, and saying, I'm not going to root for the Brazilian national team. But once the game begins, my friend, all that disappears.